What's up, everybody? Welcome on into this edition of Warchant TV. It's a hot topic, and the hot topics are discussed by the most experienced voices on the Florida State beat. That includes founder administrator of Warchant.com, Gene Williams, managing editor Ira Schoffel, and senior writer Corey Clark. If you're not a member of Warchant.com, what are you waiting on? Use that promo code Warchant30 for 30 free days of access to the website. Gentlemen, thanks for all being here. So, the first question, obviously, is there going to be football? I think we all have talked about that and feel pretty bullish, bit optimistic about it. So the next bridge to cross, will there be fans in the stands when the 2020 season starts? Gene, your thoughts?
It's a tough one to call at this point. I think there should be enough reasons to do it. If you do enough of separation of the fans and you plan out in advance. I mean, there's things like food distribution. How do you keep people from congregating, going to the bathrooms? That's always a big thing in Doak Campbell Stadium. How many people in total do you let in? I mean, there's so many things you can do, but I think a lot of smart people, especially involved some medical professionals, should be able to come up with a workable plan. I think first we'll probably feed off the NFL. What's the NFL going to do? Let's give that kind of our starting point and then work from there. My biggest hesitation, why I'm not just going to say, well, absolutely, there's going to be some fans in the stand. My concern is colleges, big universities are sometimes very sensitive to kind of political pressures and how things look. And I think the concern is it could be a bad look, especially at a game. It's going to happen. You're going to see some neighbors down there. They're going to come over and sit with their kids, and they see kids they know. Next thing you know, there's 500 people in a batch in the middle of the stadium somewhere, and someone takes a picture and it goes on social media and FSU looks bad. I think these are the kind of things that John Thrasher is probably having nightmares about right now, how to handle those potentials, because it's not like you're going to have security guards like pulling people out of groups. I just don't see that happening. So it's a loaded question. I think there probably will be, but man, it's going to be, I wouldn't want to be John Thrasher having to deal with this right now.
Ira, there felt like there was such momentum building, and I don't know if that's because we're all hoping for, but it seemed like, things are going into place. The SEC announces that they're going to allow their teams to start practicing June 8th. Louisville's joined the mix there. So it felt like this was the natural progression to start talking about things. So has that momentum extended to what you think will be fans in the stands? I mean, it's May right now as we record this. If we kind of judge what things look like in March to now, and then you think about September, I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I think a lot of people are excited and bullish on the opportunity that to have not just games, but actually have some fans there. But every time, something comes out, like the other day, Michigan's president was quoted over the weekend as saying that he's not so sure there'll be fans in the stands. He's not so sure there'll be students on campus. And if there's not students on campus, he doesn't think Michigan will be playing football. So that's a huge school, a huge program. That kind of makes everybody kind of pause and start asking some questions. As you said, though, in the Southeast, for sure, it seems like all the momentum is that they're going to play and that fans will be in the stands. I think Gene's right. I mean, I think the logistics of it are going to be challenging. For just the part of the time where the fans are in the stands, I could see up to 30, 35,000 fans in the stands from the standpoint of, it's not like you have to separate every person 6 feet apart. If a family of 6 comes or a family of 5 comes, they don't have to be separated. They live together. They don't have to sit 6 feet apart. You just have to have the next family 5 or 6 people 5 or 6 feet apart. So I think you could get a decent amount in there. The challenge is going to be getting people into the stadium, getting them out, breaks for, I don't know what you do in terms of like breaks for food. Do you have it organized? One big concern is leaving the stadium. You might be able to stagger the entrance into the stadium because you could just say, okay, we're going to limit these ticket sections or these rows and stagger the entrance times. But getting out is going to be different. As soon as that game is over or people feel like the game is over, if it's a blowout, people are going to want to leave. So those are the challenges. I think in terms of actually when they're in the stands, I think you could probably get 30,000, 35,000 people in a stadium and not feel, at least in a 70,000 or 80,000 seat stadium, and have some separation. I think the big challenge is going to be figuring out how to get them in and out.
Corey, I don't want to steal the thunder from one of the more salient points you've made on Wake Up Warchant this month, but it's the whole sort of thought process that, okay, you don't maybe want to allow fans into the stands, but bars, restaurants are open right now at 50% capacity in Florida as we record this. By September, it's hard to imagine that they won't be close to 100%. So people are going to go to their favorite sports bar and watch a football game, but they couldn't go to a stadium that's outdoors. I mean, that seems to be one of the best, again, salient points that you've made. Is that what you're kind of hanging your hat on in terms of optimism for fans in the stands in 2020?
Well, and I make a lot of salient points, as you guys can attest. That's kind of my nickname, Salient Point Clark. Yeah, but I do think Gene's point is a good one, that that colleges and universities are in a different, airspace than a professional football team, and they do take political pressure a little bit, or not even pressure, just the safety, the optics, those matter maybe a little bit more to a college or university. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that it's not, and I know I'm probably in the minority on this panel, it's not Florida State's job to keep you safe at one of their football games. You are assuming a risk by going outside to watch your favorite team. So I don't know that Florida State has to say, okay, before you get out of the stadium, you got to let's get into 17 different lines. It just doesn't seem feasible. It's not happening in everyday society. So why would it happen at a football stadium? I don't go into, I don't really if I go into a grocery store. Well, go ahead, Ira.
Well, just to counter that point, though, part of the right to open up restaurants and open up grocery stores is that they're adhering to those policies. Like when you go into the grocery store, they've got the little dots on the lines or lines on the floor that say stand here, stand there. They're doing their part. If a football stadium shows, 100 or 1,000 people lined up back to back to back, after time, the government's going to say, okay, well, you couldn't figure out a way to do it, so we're not going to let you do it. I mean, these beaches are going to have an issue. They open the beaches.
What are they doing at the beaches and the parks? Because
we'll see.
Willy-nilly. I mean, where I live in Georgia, half the time I go to these parks, and there's no like social distancing guidelines at all. People are just running by each other. That's allowed here. So, but you're not going to be allowed to walk into an outdoor stadium.
Well, isn't the difference you got 30,000 people versus 30 that are, near you in the park? I mean, I think that's part of it there. And Ira's point's a good one. I think logistically is going to be the problem. I mean, I agree with you, Cord. There should be some personal responsibility. You assume some risk. That should be inherent. But again, like you said, it goes back to optics. And I think something's going to happen. The first week of college football, there'll be pictures from all these stadiums, probably New York Times, all these other places are going to put it out there. And it's going to be a bad look for these colleges in that situation. I just don't know this. I don't know how the schools can avoid it, whether that's in the stadium or that's coming in and out, egress back and forth. There's going to be the schools are going to take a hit. I just hope they're prepared for that.
The one curious thing I have is the student body. And this is kind of why I think you could have 30 to 35,000 fans, is because, right now I think FSU gives out in normal circumstances, I think about 10,000 student tickets, I believe. Well,
I think that's right.
If those students are in dorms on campus, and if they're in classrooms and auditoriums, if they're allowed to be, and one of the things that we expect is going to happen, I don't know if FSU's announced it yet, but I think the University of Florida has, and some other schools have, that they're going to test all students when they arrive on campus. And if they leave, I think if they leave town, they're going to be asked to either quarantine or be tested again. If that happens, then you may let the students be pretty close to what they normally are, maybe spread them out a little bit. But if they're living in dorms, to Corey's point earlier, if you can be in a bar and you can stand at a bar and watch a game, why couldn't you stand next to somebody in the stadium? If the students are in dorms together, it stands to reason that they probably don't need to be too spread out in the stadium. If they do, I just think that's, again, it makes you question what's going on in the dorms.
And then you wonder, like what Gene brought up, like, what if you do have these social distancing guidelines and then 40 people just converge and start hanging out with each other, and they're not supposed to be? They're supposed to have this 2 rows in between them or whatever. Are you going to force them to leave? Are you going to, like, physically yank them away? Like, what are you going to do? I think that's unfeasible. I think that's just untenable. I think the main social distancing guideline when it comes to a football stadium is this is the max number of people we can have. Hopefully they'll be smart enough to not lay on each other. Hopefully they'll be smart enough to give themselves space. But if they're not, they don't. There's nothing you can do as a university other than just to say you're not coming in here. And there are going to be people that get sick at a football game. It's just going to happen because there are people that get sick at a park. There are people that get sick at a restaurant. It's just life. So hopefully what I'm more interested in, I'm more interested in this. I don't mean to dismiss this. It's a great topic. I'd like to call it a hot topic. But what are these universities going to do when somebody does get it from one of their games? Because it's going to happen. And they can't shut down because life doesn't shut down. The trains aren't going to shut down. The buses aren't going to shut down if people get it there. So you can't just say, how dare you, college football? You got Joey and Betty sick. Okay, but life got them sick. I hope that they don't take these stadiums, 6 people out of 30,000 get sick and say, never mind, we're not going to have fans. It's too risky.
Well, Corey, to your point, and you're always talking about the testing too, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Ira. I mean, that could be, we don't know how testing is going to be, but if it is like you pointed out in Wake Up Warchant the other day, Corey, about how it's exponentially growing and growing. If by early September, if that thing's 4 times the capacity, 5 times the capacity is now, and they'll be able to get that thing quick, man. You test all those students that week before, the week before they get on campus and all this. I think it makes, especially for the students, that makes it more doable. But in your other thing, will some fans congregate and ignore social distancing? You know what goes on before football games. You know they're going to be drinking. And it's like anything else. Your inhibitions go down. You're not thinking as reasonably. You're going to sit there high five with you. You're going to see your buddy down the road. You're going to fist pump. You're going to high five. You're going to hug. You're going to do whatever. It's going to happen. I mean, that's the thing. Florida State needs to know it is going to happen. It's then how do they deal with it? Like you said, I can't think they're going to go in there physically break up. You make announcements. You do everything you can, but ultimately it is down to the people to make the rational decision. If they get sick, that's on them.
I don't want to call it being greedy, but, when I heard about 10, 15,000 people in a stadium, and I think about most large schools that do care about college football and are pressing ahead, you figure that you could safely space that amount of people out and make it work pretty well. But, we're hearing Ohio State's AD say that they might do 15, 20, but they might be able to go up to 40,000. Do you think it'll be, Ira, up to individual schools, or will it be conferences that determine the capacity that they want to be in? And will that be fair if a certain school in one conference, their state's in good shape and they can be at 80% of capacity, and then another state's like, well, we're only good enough to be at 30% capacity? I mean, how much problems could arise from that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it goes back to the issue of fairness, which is kind of happening all across college football right now. One of the topics that came up, this past week when the NCAA ruled that voluntary workouts can resume, a lot of schools, as you said, Louisville and the SEC schools, they're going to get back at it pretty quickly. We expect Florida State to be in there pretty quickly too, probably maybe the second week of June. We're thinking somewhere around their second or third week of June. I don't know if you saw Bronco Mendenhall came out of Virginia over the weekend and said, we're not starting anytime soon. He doesn't feel comfortable at all. So Virginia, so if they have to wait, they're going to have to wait. Well, now you're going to have schools all around the country where some schools started back in early June, some schools start back in July, some schools start back in late June. They're all over the map. And then that's a good point about the crowd sizes. What if a stadium that normally is a really difficult place to play, where they get 80 to 90,000 fans in, but they're only going to go at 15,000? Whereas another school that maybe typically gets 40, but they're going to go with 30 or 35. Now all of a sudden that's a kind of a tougher place to play. It's the whole thing's going to be crazy, but I don't think it's going to be mandated by conferences. I think it is going to be up to the individual schools based on what's going on in their states. So I think my guess is it's going to be pretty similar throughout the state of Florida. I'd be really surprised if the governor and the board of governors let Florida have 30 or 40,000 fans in their games, but Florida State was only having 10 or 15,000. So I think you're going to see some compromises, but I think it's going to be pretty regionally. I doubt it's going to be at the conference level. Here's
my question to both of you. So say Florida State, and I think we all agree it's not going to be full capacity, but let's say that the mandate is 25% of capacity. So you got 20,000 people for every home game. Do you make it a 2-year deal with this, if it's a sweeping conference-wide edict? Because I don't feel like it's very fair that when Clemson and Florida come to Doak, there's going to be 20,000 people in the stands, but the very next year when they go to the Swamp, it's going to be back to 80,000. That's not a true home and home. So does Florida State get back-to-back home games against Clemson? Because this one doesn't really count. This isn't a true home atmosphere, a home environment. I think that's something you got to think about.
And the bigger concern is it's not even the fairness is a big part of it, and I think that's where you're coming at it, but also financially. Florida State would only get a quarter of what Clemson could get next year. for their home game. So it's another great question. But at the same time, I don't think anybody would want to keep limiting fans longer than you have to. I mean, maybe they could work out a revenue sharing deal. I mean, this is just throwing it out there. I don't know how possible it is where, okay, this year, and those teams that host next year in home and homes have to get a cut back to the schools that had the smaller crowds. I mean, it's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, that stings for Florida State of all the years to have, Clemson and Florida. Those are the two sellouts you're going to have are close to sellout. So that's the big money games for Florida State this year. But and to your earlier point, interesting, I was thinking about, we were talking about stadium variation. Think about Syracuse. If they do field a football team this year, being indoors and in that state, I mean, I could see even a scenario where Syracuse basically has no fans in an indoor arena for home games, but yet they go on the road and maybe they come to Florida State. Maybe there's 40,000 people there. I mean, you want to talk about no fans to, almost full stadium. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, this is Florida State's turn to go up to Syracuse this year, so that's even.
Well, yeah, they may have to come down. I mean, that's another thing. Maybe they switch around. Maybe that's a situation. They said, "Look, to work this out, we'll go down there this year instead, and you come up here next year." I don't know.
Well, we'll see how this is all going to be handled. I mean, interesting thing, or Ira mentioned about Bronco Mendenhall saying that they're not ready to go, and certain commissioners, certain schools might want to slow play things. But then you have, I think Ira, you and I both read in AL.com about. There are certain administrators that don't want to say that we're only going to do 20% because they don't want to undersell. They're staying optimistic and bullish, and they're hopeful that they might be able to go up to 60, 70% of capacity. So as we sit here and talk about it in May, that might sound scary, but as 70 days elapses, ultimately who knows where we'll be sitting. Do check out warchant.com for the latest on Florida State athletics as we approach closer to what we hope is a return to football and sports at large. For Gene, Ira, and Corey, I'm Aslan. Thanks for watching.